Welcome back to another episode of the Jessica Ella podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Ella. I am Australia's leading women's trauma therapist, healer, and creator and founder of the Aruka therapy method. Today's episode, I'm going to talk about being a mum and healing your trauma, or being a mum with a lot of trauma that is surfacing and going on a healing journey whilst you have small children. Because a lot of people say to me, how the hell did you heal through all of this trauma with when your kids were so young? Like, how did you deal with, having these sessions and having all these emotions come up and flashbacks and all of this happening whilst having to parent, especially when my children were quite small? And so today I really want to focus on why trauma actually does often resurface in a really big way in motherhood, but also how I got through that and how you can get through that too if you're in this season of life. So when people normally ask me, how did you get through that period? How did you make it through? I respond with great difficulty. I got through it with great difficulty. But there was always this push and pull, or there was these two parts of me. One part that was like, thank God, universe, creator, whatever you want to call it, that the trauma came up in such a big way after I'd had my children, because they became my reason to keep living. I often think, what would happen if all of that hit me before I had them? I potentially could have really lost, any means for living. And there were a lot of times where in my journal, it read like, I have to stay for them. I have to end the cycle of suffering, and me ending my life would continue that cycle of suffering for them. So they became my why. They became the way that I could get through everything. But on the exact same, on the opposite end of the spectrum, there was also this like, if I didn't have kids, this would be so much easier. I would have time to have a healing session, to feel my feelings, to actually let everything land, because I would come out of a healing session an emotional wreck and have to deal with two children that were emotional wrecks at the time, 1 and 3 years old or 2 and 4 years old. So there was a lot of like learning how to navigate that. But I also do believe that it was the perfect time. And if you're in this situation right now where you're thinking, why now? I do believe that it's the perfect time, and it happens for a reason. So let's talk about that first. I think the reason why I believe the trauma comes up, I've spoken about this in a past podcast episode, but a lot of the time, the reason that the trauma comes up, especially when we have newborn babies, is that I know for me and for so many women that I work with, they spent decades partying, seeing friends, climbing the corporate ladder, just living in this busyness and completely detached from any feelings or emotion, and just in this like fight or flight state. And what happens is they come home with this baby. That babies don't go in fast pace. You can't live a fast paced life with a baby. Sometimes you are breastfeeding or bottle feeding or whatever you're doing. Like, it takes hours from start to finish. Everything is really slowed down. And with that slowing down comes a surfacing of a lot of emotions that you've potentially been pushing down and not feeling for a long time. So this is kind of like the first thing that I say to people when they have postnatal depression, or, they're experiencing a lot of difficulties, is yes, it's also just such a difficult and new, fresh time, but there is potentially a lot of emotions coming to the surface that are just purely wanting to be felt. So step one for these people is actually understanding that, I believe that our menstrual cycles are also designed to allow us to have this week out of the month where we feel everything deeply, so we can process all the things that we've sort of rushed through over the month. I feel like motherhood is a great opportunity for you to look at that. So instead of panicking that we're not feeling good, it's an invitation to go a little bit deeper into ourselves so that we can shift these layers so that we're not passing them on to our children. And this is what it was for me. It was like, how can I regulate my nervous system so that my children can feel more regulated as well? Because a child, up until I think it's around age 12, their nervous system is directly impacted so powerfully and like so strongly intertwined with our nervous systems that they actually feel our stress and they try to figure out, because you're the person that's supposed to be looking after them and you're responsible for their survival. They pair their nervous system with ours and they feel our stresses and they try to regulate, but it ends up in screaming babies, which makes the mother even more stressed and anxious. And it's this vicious cycle. So it's an invitation to regulate your nervous system. It's an invitation to look at what's coming up and let's see it as an opportunity to heal for our future and for our children's future. But the next thing that happens is that sometimes we can unconsciously push things down, memories, past traumas, even just, bullying at school, which is, not a small thing, but it is compared to some of the clients that I work with. We can push down these traumas or these experiences and kind of forget about them until our children reach the age that we were when that thing happened to us. And it happens all the time with people who were bullied. All of a sudden, they have anxiety and they have all of these memories and all of this pain resurfacing when it's time for their children to go to school. It happens all throughout their milestones, depending on how you were treated at that age and what was happening to you at that age. So for me, there was this, when my children turned certain ages, I was actually able to notice, obviously I'd been in the healing world, but I was actually able to notice and pair up, oh wow, when one of my children turned 7 was when the worst memory of my life that happened at 7 years old came back up to the surface. And I feel like there is a part of us that notices and realizes how small we were, and we notice, how vulnerable we were. And it can be a really hard thing to confront when that trauma comes up and you look at your child and you think, how could anybody do that to a child this age? But I think it's coming up again to show us that something is there to be healed. A lot of people are really frustrated by the experience that their children trigger them, and that their children are triggering these memories to come back up. And like I said, it can feel like such an inconvenience because you're trying to parent at the same time, but it is a blessing, because what it means and what it's really meant for me is that I'm not going to project any of those things that happened onto my children if I heal them in myself. And what I mean when I say this is that I realized that I was the perfect example of one of my traumas was being bullied in school. And when it came time to sending my eldest son, River, to school, I wanted to homeschool him. And I was so anxious about sending him to school. I tried everything I could with my ex-husband to not send him to school. I came up with every argument that homeschooling is better. I still do believe that to a degree, but I realized that all of the anxiety that I had around how his experience was going to be at school was a projection of my own experience. I had to look into that. I had to deal with the bullying. I had to deal with the beliefs that were coming up around he's going to experience this and he's going to get teased and it's going to affect him. And I had to shift all of that so that he could live his own life and have his own experiences. And I was just saying to a friend the other day, it's actually hilarious because he's the kind of kid that I would have hated in school because he is good at everything. It doesn't matter what he's doing. He wins first place in every athletic thing without even trying. He was school council. He's Mr. Popular. He's got all the friends. He's confident. He's excelling. He's getting really amazing grades. And I was the kid that had no friends, sitting in the corner. I was strange. I was getting bullied. I was failing. I was struggling to learn. And so now, because I removed myself from that and allowed him to have an experience, his experience is so different to mine. And I love that for him. And I love that I was able to get out of the way to allow him to experience that. So that's just one small example of the way that we don't even realize that a lot of the beliefs we have and the very strong beliefs we have about parenting or about certain things, when they feel anxious and heavy and panicked and from a place of fear, you know that that is coming from a wound. If it feels intuitive and light and open and you're like, this is the right path, this feels really good and it's clear, it's coming from intuition. If it's coming from, like I said, this chaotic feeling, there's something to look at there in yourself before you project it onto your kid. So how did I get through it? I'd been doing a lot of healing work for a long time, but it was 2020, which means that Banjo was 2 and River was 4. It was 2020 when the worst memories hit and when I really started to realize that I needed to cut my father out of my life, when I started to have memories resurfacing all the time. And to give you some context, if you haven't listened to my life story, if you've just landed here on this first episode, what I was dealing with was I was laying in bed with my son at night and I was having all of these memories and flashbacks coming and hitting me constantly, nearly every night. New memories, new flashbacks of my dad sexually abusing me. Later on down the track of his father, my grandfather, raping me as a child, just so many different memories of abuse constantly hitting me. And I was trying to navigate cutting my father out of my life, he's a terrifying, quite dangerous man. And I was trying to cut him out of my life, and then I was grieving him because even though he had tortured me as well, sexually abused me throughout my whole life, I had a really strong trauma bond with him and I found it really difficult to let him go. So I was grieving him. I was terrified of him. I had a nervous breakdown. I had a panic attack. I was having auditory hallucinations, felt like I was going insane. I was dealing with all of this whilst also being a conscious parent because I had already learned so much about healing that I was wanting my nervous system to be regulated. I was wanting to make sure that I was instilling really good beliefs in my children because I knew the effects of parenting on a child's belief system. So I had this extra pressure of creating these, in my mind, like superhumans who are unaffected by trauma whilst being hit with all of this panic and grief and these emotions. And like when I look back, I wish I could have done it different, but I couldn't. There was times where I couldn't get out of bed. There was times where I'd bring them into bed for cuddles because I just couldn't cope with the day. There were times where I was having panic attacks. There was times where I just wasn't the mother that I wanted to be, but every single day I showed up for them. Every single day I tried my hardest to be present. And I think that that's all that you can do. And the more that you focus on, we can't give up, the more that you focus on actually healing and moving through those layers so that you can shift it, so that you can be the best mum that you can be. It's the only thing that you can do in those periods of time. And so my mission was always just one more day, one more memory, one memory at a time, one day at a time, and just show up the best that you can. And that would be my advice to everybody is, you're never going to do it perfectly and you actually just can't beat yourself up about the way that you did it because it's really difficult to live in survival and to raise someone at the same time. And I'm sure you're probably doing a much better job than what you realized. I used to beat myself up and then I looked back through my phone and I was like, every day that I thought that I was just a mess, I look back at these videos and I'm playing with them and we're down the beach every second day and they're meditating and I'm teaching them these little mindset things. And I actually was doing so much of a better job than what I realized. So give yourself some grace. But what the healing work actually looks like, because the thing is, a lot of people have these memories and these flashbacks and they try to push it down and it just keeps coming back up. And so what the healing work actually looks like and needs to look like is you do need to process those memories. You do need to find somebody, ideally an Aruka therapist, who can process the memories, who can allow you to shift the emotions, who can allow you to shift the subconscious beliefs. You do have to do that work. And like I said, it can be hard because it brings things up. But at the end of the day, you're probably projecting more onto your children than what you realize through not dealing with it. On the flip side here, you might be feeling a little bit rattled for a couple of days, or you might, feel a bit spacey after your session, but within 48 hours, the memories gone. That you can access them. There's no emotion. You don't get flashbacks anymore. It's not coming up in your body every day. You feel calmer. You feel more at peace. And it really is that rapid and that powerful for you to work through these memories and to shift these things. So I think for everyone, my advice is one, give yourself some grace, but also you do have to do that work and it's being shown to you because it's the time to heal it so that you don't pass it on. And I think that's the greatest gift that we can give to our children. And a lot of mums say to me, I don't have the time to work on myself. Like, I'm constantly doing things for my children. Like, they need to come first. And I always say to them, they do come first, because when you heal yourself, you heal them. And when you show up as the best version of yourself, as the mother that you've always wanted to be, when you actually become more calm and regulated, they become more calm and regulated. And there was a really cool story the other day. One of the clients in the online clinic, so she sees Sophie, and she has a daughter who has chronic anxiety. So this separation anxiety. And she'd taken her to all of these different modalities and therapies, and her daughter she was always every day crying. And this mum came to Sophie and she did a session on herself. And in the next 48 hours, things started to shift. And when she came back to the next session, she had this realization, and she said, since everything landed from that session, my daughter overnight, her separation anxiety has just gone. And she had actually healed it in herself and through herself into her daughter. Now, there's a number of things that happen here. Woo-woo wise, generationally, she's shifted something and it's gone through to her daughter in an energetic way. But also on a nervous system and very logical level, what's happening here is that her nervous system being more regulated and her feeling safe in herself, her daughter goes, ooh, mum's okay now. Because a lot of the time, separation anxiety is actually happening from the child picking up on the mother's distress and not wanting to leave the mother alone because they don't feel like it is safe for them to leave. So the separation anxiety gets heightened as the mother gets more heightened, that the child's got the separation anxiety, and it becomes this like big spiral effect. So when their nervous system is regulated and they feel safe, the child feels that safety and they feel safe to go out into the world and live their life the way that they want to live, play with their friends, do their things, be a kid, because they know that their mother is safe and she's going to be okay. Even if you think that you're handling it well, even if you think that you're masking it, children can feel your emotions. And one of the most profound things that I learned is that when you have a child that's always screaming and crying, what they're actually doing a lot of the time, especially if it's chronic, is they're trying to regulate the mother's nervous system for the mother. So what's actually happening is the child's like trying to get the mum to cry, because crying is a way to regulate your nervous system. It's a release. So the child cries because they're like, come on, mum, regulate. I need you to be safe so that I can survive. And what actually ends up happening is the child cries, the mum just gets more and more stressed and worked up. The child cries more, and it's this vicious cycle. So our children are trying to regulate for us, which is so beautiful, but also at the same time so sad. I think that one of our duty is to look after ourselves first. So book the session, look after yourself. And if you can't do it for yourself first, which I totally understand, I had zero self-worth when I started doing the work, and I found it really hard to spend $50 on myself. I didn't think that I deserved the time. I didn't think I deserved the healing work. And a lot of mums are in that situation. Kids come first. There's other things I could spend the money on, but hopefully, knowing what you know now and what you've learned today, you'll understand that actually you spending that money on yourself and healing yourself, healing your limiting beliefs so you're not projecting them onto your child, healing your own traumas so that, you're not constantly dissociated or checked out or pushing something down, and healing your nervous system so that they can feel calm in your presence, they can co-regulate with you so that they can feel safe to go out into the world as well, because they feel that lack of safety. You're healing them by healing yourself. So if you have any questions around this, as always, I say, please reach out. I can deep dive into so many more of this subject. But if you are a mum who's dealing with trauma and on a healing journey whilst parenting, I just want to say, it is tough. It is hard. If you have to just keep going. You have to work through each memory, each trauma, and just try and flip that narrative around. Not why is this happening? Why am I feeling all of these emotions? Why am I feeling so depressed? But what is this showing me? How is it showing me? Where do I need to go deeper? What's it showing me and what can I learn from this? So I want to thank you again for listening. As always, if you know a mum who needs to hear this, please share the episode, and whichever platform you're listening on, please subscribe so that you will be notified each week when a new episode comes out. The podcast is ad-free. It's completely free. I don't hold back. I give as much advice as I can. And I really appreciate subscribing, commenting, doing everything that you can to help push the podcast, to help it to grow. I'll see you in the next episode.